Hello and welcome to session 3. How are you? How have you been since our last session? Claire and I have been out for our daily exercise around the Bude Sea Pool before this session today. Can you see how part of the sea pool wall is made from the cliffs and part of it is man-made? And just look at these fabulous views. I absolutely love swimming here.
I couldn't agree more, Helen, and maybe you'll see some of this yourself when you come and see us in the summer. But for now, we need to get back to our classroom.
Absolutely, and let's see how many beach features you can spot on our way back.
I'm back now. How many beach features did you get, Helen?
I think I got about 4 or 5 as we were coming back there. How many did you get? It's been lovely to see all your pictures that you've sent in and all your work. We've got a selection here on the screen for you. Thanks for sending it all in.
Absolutely. Thank you for doing all of that. And how many of you actually tried the experiment at home? Every time I see something now that's plastic, I think to myself, is that going to sink or is it going to float?
That's really interesting. So today we've got loads of things planned for you, loads of exciting activities. We're going to be playing a game, we've got activities going on. We really hope that you have as much fun as we're going to have.
So let's have a look around our beach. Looks really clean today, doesn't it? But is it really clean? I'm sure we're going to find out in today's lesson. Let's go back to Helen and see what's in store for us.
Okay, so are you ready? Today in our lesson we're going to be looking at some of the biggest things that we come across in our ocean and some of the smallest things that we come across in our ocean and in our classroom. How are we going to be doing that? We're going to be playing a Spot the Difference. We're going to be looking at some facts about Nerdles. We're going to be looking at some facts about nets. We're then going to be looking at the impact of nets and Nerdles. And our final thing that we're going to be doing is coming up with a solution. We're also throughout this session going to be looking at some words. Perhaps some of them are new to you. They're up here on the PowerPoint and I'll just give you a couple of seconds to see if you can actually work through them. But you might need some help when you come to the last one. So the words here are raw, nerdle, entangled, ghost net and cetacean. Have you heard of those words? We've actually used a couple of them already in this session. If those words are new to you, see if you can use them as much as possible throughout our work today. Are you ready? I'm going to show you 2 pictures side by side. And what I want you to do with these 2 pictures is spot all the differences between the 2. Not sure where to start? So have a think about size and shape and possibly colour as well. How long do you think I'm going to give you for this activity? Yes, if you've been with us in previous weeks, you'll know that it's 30 seconds. Are you ready? Steady, go. Time's up. How did you get on at home? As you can see, Claire's been doing it too. Let's pop over and see how she got on.
So I've got The real difference is how tangled the net looks. It looks like a big ball of knots. And the little nurdles there look so neat and tidy, don't they? I really like that. What else have we got? I've got, obviously the nurdles are all quite pastel-y colours. They're quite pale, whereas that net is a really bright, vibrant colour. They both look very hard though, don't they? What else have I got? Oh, the shape, of course. The nurdles are little round balls and the nets are made up of long strands.
Wow, didn't she get a lot? It's amazing how many differences there are. I'm wondering if there's any similarities. Let's pop over to Claire and have a look.
Well, I think they both look really hard, and you know what? I think they're both shiny as well. Let's go back to Helen to carry on the lesson.
Thanks, Claire. So, we've played Spot the Difference. We've started to have a look at nurdles, their shapes, their sizes, their colours. Next, we're going to be looking at a nurdle life cycle and some facts about nurdles. There's that word again, nurdle. We'll come back to it in a mo. So, what actually is a life cycle? Do you know at home?
Oh, Helen, I know. Can I tell you?
Yes, please, Claire.
Great, okay, so the life cycle is what happens to a thing from the moment it starts to the moment it ends, or the moment it's born to the moment that it goes away again at the end.
That's absolutely right. Thanks, Claire. Did you get that at home? Anyway, we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves at the moment. We haven't actually explained what a nurdle is. Let's have a look at a nurdle and a lentil here. Can you see how similar the two of them actually look? The same shape and the same sort of size. And it's for that reason that nurdles are often compared to lentils.
Hang on, Helen. That is all very well. However, you still haven't actually told us what a nurdle is. So I'm going to do that. So a nurdle is plastic in its raw form. Now that's one of our words for today, isn't it? Raw. And what do I mean by that? Let's think about this as if it's a carrot. Have you ever had a carrot when it's cold, it's hard and it's a little bit crunchy? That is a raw carrot. And what happens then is it gets cooked and it gets heated and turned into your dinner. Now the same thing happens with plastic. This is a raw bit of plastic that gets heated and moulded and becomes a plastic product. Now everything in the world that's made from plastic starts its life as this little nurdle before it gets heated and turned into the plastic product that you use at home.
Perfect. So now we know what a nurdle is, we can start to think about its life cycle. The nurdle is made from oil in the factory, and they're so small that they can then get spilled either when they're transported or in the factory. And because they're small, then they get overlooked within the whole process. Can you remember last week how Claire said things got from our houses and our homes into our classroom here? Absolutely, you've got it right. They get transported here by the wind, the rain, streams and then into the rivers, and those small nurdles end up here in our classroom. Let's look at some more nurdle facts. I'm going over to interview Claire as she's our resident nurdle expert. Hi Claire. We've come to find out loads of information about nurdles today. So our first question is, how big are nurdles?
So nurdles are always under 5 millimetres, and that's what classes them as a microplastic. But they're normally only about 2 or 3 millimetres big.
Oh, okay. And how many of them are there in the ocean?
There's no way of knowing. Nobody knows for sure. But we predict that there are billions of billions of billions in the ocean. So here's a crazy number for you. Every single second in Europe, 260,000 of these nurdles are spilled and end up in our ocean.
Wow. So what's the most common colour of nurdle in our classroom here?
Well, they do come in every single colour under the sun, as you can see, but the most common we find is white. And there's a very good reason for that. If you think about white, when you add that to any other colour, it changes its colour. For example, if you have red and you add white, it makes pink. So it's a very, very helpful colour to have.
Okay. And then if that's the most common colour, what's our least common colour?
Well, I think it's purple. Purple, I've only ever found 2 purple nurdles, And I've found thousands of these things.
Okay, and how much do our nurdles weigh?
A fraction of a gram. They weigh about the same as a grain of sand.
Oh, okay, and can nurdles float?
Yes, and that is one of their biggest problems. If you think back to the lesson last week, we learnt that most plastics float. And because these are so light and they float so easily, that's why they are a huge issue. So what happens is when nurdles are made in the factory, they can get spilled at every single stage, as you'll remember from the life cycle. And when they're spilled, they float. And as we know, things that float end up in our rivers, which end up on our beaches and in the ocean. And when they get to the ocean, they carry on floating, which means the waves bring them back onto the beaches sometimes.
Thanks, Claire.
No worries, Helen.
We've hidden loads of words about nurdles in our word search, which you can download from our website. See how many you can find. So now we know a little bit about nurdles, wouldn't it be good to know where to find them?
So they often form tracks or lines, just like this one in the sand here. Now, does this remind you of anything we learnt about last week? It looks a little bit like a strand line, doesn't it? And we're going to come back to that in just a mo. Now, they can also sometimes get stuck in the rock pools and the seaweeds, and that can be really, really bad. Some days are worse than others, and that's all something to do with the wind. Helen, what have we learnt about the wind already that might link to nurdles?
We know that they're very light and that they float.
So we learnt last week about currents and how the wind moves the sea in different directions. What do you think might happen to these nurdles if I blow on them? Let's pretend I'm a big gust of wind.
So we can see here that Claire's blowing those microplastics from one side, and what happens to them? And then she turns around to the other side, and then again, what happens as she blows them across?
So if we think about some days we've got loads of nurdles on our beaches and other days we have none, it's all to do with the direction that the wind is blowing in.
Amazing. So this is something that you could try at home, kids. Fill up the sink or bath, pop in some plastics that float, blow them around, see what happens, and that's exactly how the wind blows the microplastics onto our beaches.
So if we come back to our microline here, and we said it looks a little bit like a strand line. Do you remember what a strand line is? It's the highest point that the tide comes to every single day. And the microline is exactly that. It's just a little bit lower down the beach, but it is still a strand line. So tides and waves are just like people. The really big, powerful, strong waves carry things further. They go a little bit faster and they carry the heavy things. But just like little people, the little waves carry things not quite so far, not quite as fast, and they carry the lighter things, just like nurdles.
So it's kind of like when we go to the beach with my kids. I'm the strongest, so I carry the heaviest things. My daughter's the smallest, so she carries the lighter things. Is it the same with you when you go to the beach with your friends or family?
So do you remember last week Helen showed us how to sieve for nurdles? Now what would you do if you had loads of nurdles? Remember they look a little bit like dots. Perhaps you would make a picture. You could use the nurdles to make an outline or maybe a doodle. It's time for you to get involved, guys, and we're going to make a picture. Now I'm going to use my nurdles, and I know you don't have any at home, but we know these look like dots and you have got pen and paper, so you can make a dot picture. I'm going to try and make something really fun from mine. We've got 2 minutes. Why don't we go over to Helen? You can talk them through it while I crack on. I'll see you when I've started.
Excellent. Well, here we go. 2 minutes. So I'm going to make a sunshine, and I'm going to draw some dots here and draw my circle. And you can see I'm using green, and the sunshine's usually yellow, but that's okay. And I'm going to add some more dots in. There we go. And the sun's rays I'm going to bring out here, and I'm going to bring my dots a lot closer together there so that they look like the lines are actually filled in with all those dots. There we go, and we've got some more dots there. And we're making that sun a little bit darker there in the middle with all of those dots. There we go. And lots of rays coming off our sunshine. There we go. Brilliant. Oh, we're about halfway through now. Let's go over and see how Claire's getting on with hers.
I'm doing good, Helen. I'm actually just making a little doodle because these Nerdles are so multicoloured. It's really fun. I'm actually going to make a little cross, I think, with my Nerdles. Now, I'm not going for any particular colour order because I really like how it looks all jumbled up like that. Now, what do we think that looks like? It's a bit of a T at the moment, isn't it? We could put a couple of spots. Oh, look, and it's my favourite purple Nerdle. Don't get many of those around here. That's one of my special ones, that is. Do a little dot there, a little dot there. Doesn't this look cool? I think it's time to finish up, guys. Let's head back to Helen.
Cool. That was fun. How did you get on at home, everyone? I made a sunshine. I feel I know all about Nerdles now, which is great. What about you at home? So we've learnt lots about the smallest items of marine plastic. Let's have a little look and a little recap about where we're up to. So far we've played Spot the Difference, we've looked at the smallest items of marine plastic, and next we're going to be looking at the biggest item of marine plastic. I'm going to show you a picture of something called a ghost net. That's one of our words for today. Grab a paper and pencil. Have you got one? We're going to need those in just a moment. So on this picture, what I'd like you to do, I'd like you to think about all the words that you could use to describe this ghost net, and then jot them down on your piece of paper. If there's someone with you at the moment, maybe you want to have a chat to them about it, and that's absolutely fine too. Are we ready? I'll start you off with a couple of words here. Jumbled, tangled, messy.
Okay, so it's definitely quite long, and I would say it's very colourful. And I liked Helen's word there of jumbled. I'm going to use that one. That's a great word. I think it looks very hard as well. Now, I think trying to think about how it might smell. It's hard to tell that from a picture. Maybe I'll not do the smelling one. What other things does it look like? I would say it's knotty, definitely. Oh, I think I'm running out of time there, aren't I? Have I been using some English and literacy skills there?
Thanks, Claire. So what actually is ghost net? Ghost net is fishing net that's lost at sea. It drifts around the oceans and can get caught up in those ocean plastic gyres. We talked about those last week. Do you remember what the ocean gyres are? Yes, you're right. They're the plastic garbage gyres, 5 of them that we know about, moving and swirling about across the oceans. It's called ghost net as nobody really knows where they are and how they float about and move about in the oceans. And they break down into smaller and smaller pieces as they move about. Let's decide between us how much ghost net ends up in the ocean each year. Is it A, 50,000 tonnes, B, 700,000 tonnes, or C, 100,000 tonnes? What do you think? If you said B, 700,000 tonnes, you got it right. Well done. I'm just trying to imagine all of that ghost net floating about in the sea. Perhaps you'd like to draw a picture of the ghost net scales. Or you could create your own ghost net with string or wool or paper. Send us a picture of what you create. We'd love to see it. Before we find out a little bit more about some of the problems this ghost net can create, let's have a closer look at this net. Have you got your paper and your lists from earlier on? We're going to be thinking about these describing words. What's the posh technical name for a describing word?
Oh, Helen, I know. It's an adjective. Did you get that at home? Now, it's sometimes called a word class. We use adjectives to describe things, often our 5 senses. Do you know what our 5 senses are?
Okay, so our 5 senses are smell, taste, touch, hearing and sight. When I come to the beach, I can often hear the booming waves. I can feel the gritty sand and I can smell the salty air. What's it like when you come to the beach?
Well, I'm just looking at my list here of all those adjectives I wrote down about the net, and I've got that it was knotty and long and colourful, kind of like mermaid's hair.
Right then, back to ghost nets and why they cause such problems.
So ghost nets can cause massive problems in our oceans. Now in the UK alone, we lose 1,250 kilometres every single year. And what can happen is cetaceans and seals can get caught in these nets, and that doesn't end very well for them. When that happens and a cetacean does get caught in the net, it will sink to the bottom of the ocean because of the weight of that animal. And then when that animal passes away, the net will float again to catch more cetaceans. Now they are made of plastic as well, and as we know, all plastics break down into smaller bits of plastic and end up on our beaches like we've been looking at in the last few lessons. Nobody really knows how much is in the ocean. It's not documented, people lose them and they don't know where, and that is one of the biggest issues. Now there are many reasons why a fisherman might lose their net, and most of them are accidental.
So can you think why a fishing boat might accidentally lose a big net? Behind me you can see the waves crashing, and we're surrounded by rocks here.
Exactly. So what can happen is in big stormy waters, the nets can get damaged and then actually break off from their boats. Sometimes as well, when it's really, really big stormy seas, it's actually safer for the fishing boats to let their nets go so that they can stay safe. And you're right, there's lots of rocks on the grounds too, and sometimes the nets can get caught on those rocks and ripped from the boats that way.
So let's think about this ghost net and what we can do with it when it washes up on the shore. Let's head over to Claire to find out.
There are so many organisations and companies now making things from fishing nets, which is really awesome. There's Odyssey Innovation, and they turn nets into plastic kayaks that they can donate out. There's Waterhaul, and they turn them into sunglasses. There's even a company based in Chile that turn them into skateboards. And what they can do is another company taking the threads from the plastic nets and turning it into a new thread that they can use as a fabric.
So while Claire has been telling us all about these excellent organisations, I've been looking around our classroom for rope. And you can see here, there are these little bits, and these are ghost gear. They've broken off from the bigger ghost nets. I wonder how much this net here weighs. Let's go and find out. So let's have a look at this net here. Do we think it's going to weigh a kilogram or more or less? A kilogram's about the same as a bag of sugar or a bag of flour. Have you got one of those in your kitchen cupboard at home to have a feel of? Right, let's give this away. Okay. So this weighs about 50 kilograms, and that's about the same as a person. It doesn't matter how much rope or net you pick up, because every little bit makes a difference and won't get eaten by an animal. Let's go over to Claire and find out what people are doing with this net.
You can make some really cool art from the little bits of rope that you find on the beach. Here's some that some of our friends have made, and if you do go to the beach and find some bits of rope, we'd love to see some pictures of what you create. So we've spent loads of time today learning about the biggest things in the oceans and the smallest things in the oceans. Should we go back to Helen for a recap?
So the smallest items are called Nerdles, and they're the raw form of plastic, and they go to make all the plastic items that we use every day.
They come in all the different colours under the rainbow and often look like balls or lentils or pellets.
They get spilled easily at every stage of their use because they're so small and light.
And it's really important we pick them up off the oceans because seabirds and fish can often mistake them as food.
And the biggest thing we find in our seas are ghost nets. These are nets that are lost at sea and they float around all over the world.
They can be all different sizes, and some of them are bigger than our entire beach here at our beach school.
Some of them will sink because they're so heavy. Others will float around the oceans, moving on the currents and the stormy seas.
It's super important to collect these out of our oceans and off our beaches because cetaceans and seals and seabirds can often get caught in them and entangled.
And these are some of the words that we've learnt today. Raw, nerdle, entangled, ghost net and cetacean.
Great, good recap. So if we know that these two things cause massive problems to our wildlife, I wonder what we can do to help. So nerdles are raw plastic, aren't they? So if we use less raw plastic in our daily lives, less things need to be made.
Well, that's an easy one, Claire. I remember back to that huge list of plastics we had last week. We all pledged to change one thing. I'm sure we could all change another thing too.
So if everybody used a little bit less plastic, then less nerdles would need to be made, less nerdles would then get spilled, and less nerdles would end up on our beaches being eaten by our fish from our oceans.
Luckily for us, there are lots of people trying to make things from new materials and from recycled plastic. Hang on a minute, Claire. Is it any better if people actually try and use recycled materials to make new products?
Yeah, that's a great question, Helen. In fact, there is already enough plastic existing in the world to never need to use a raw nerdle again. Therefore, these nerdles don't need to be made anymore. So what that means is we need to find a way to collect all of those plastics before they end up on our oceans, where they break down into those microplastics that we learned all about last week.
Wow, that'll really help stop all those nerdles from coming into our classroom. But what about the ghost nets?
Now this one's a little bit more difficult. There are several really awesome charities and organisations that spend all day diving down to the bottom of the oceans to pick up the ghost nets. But that's not something that you guys can really help with at the moment.
But maybe when they're older, Claire. Perhaps when you're older, it's something that you want to get involved with?
The thing that you can do now to get involved is if you find a net on the beach, make sure you tell someone so that it gets collected and taken away.
Hang on, Claire. If they're on the beach, though, surely that's not too much of a problem.
Now that's interesting, isn't it? I wonder if you can remember back to earlier in the lesson when we learned about how wind direction can affect the plastics and why they might end up on our beaches.
Ah, yes, of course. So, if a big net ends up here on the sand and a nice big offshore wind, big waves, and before we know it, that net is back out at sea and the cetaceans are caught up in it again.
Exactly. So I think it's time for a little activity. Here's something you can do at home. We would love it if you could make a poem or a rap or a song about something you have learnt today. It could be about nerdles, it could be about nets, it could be about anything that you've found interesting from today's lesson. Try and use some of those words that we've used today, those 5 new words, and see what you can come up with. We're going to set the timer for you to help you out, and we'll be back to see how you're getting on in just a mo. How are you doing, guys? We're halfway through now. Helen, how are you getting on?
I've made a good start. It's not finished yet, but here we go. Nerdles are plastic, they can be bad. They get eaten by fish, and that makes me sad.
That was amazing! Okay, here's another few minutes to finish off, guys. That is it, guys. Time is up, but don't worry if you haven't finished it. You can always have a little bit more time at the end of the lesson. Don't forget, we love to see your work. Perhaps you'd like to film yourself reading out your poem or singing us your song and send it in. Helen, let's hear yours then.
Nerdles are plastic, they can be bad. They get eaten by fish, and that makes me sad. Volunteers collect them, making them to art, which gladdens my heart. Oh, what can we do? What can we do? Oh, what can we do to stop them floating through?
Helen, that was awesome. Good job. Have you done any better? Don't forget to send us your work and let us know.
So I've loved learning all about the smallest and the largest things in our oceans. Hi, Claire.
Hi, I thought I'd stop in and just say hello. Guys, don't forget we love to see your work, so please do send us your pictures, your poems, maybe your list of adjectives that you did about the nets and the nurdles. Now we will be back with you next lesson telling you all about the creatures that live within our rock pools. Right now I'm going to make the most of the low tide and go for a little bit of a sandcastle building session. What are you going to do, Helen?
I'm off to finish my poem.
Perfect. Well, we will see you next time for some more lessons from the 2 Minute Beach School. Bye!